So good evening to all of you. I don't know, did you guys coordinate to all wear red?
I literally just texted that to Katie and Barbara and said, we're all wearing red/orange. So
yeah, I was like, I didn't get the memo, and I feel a little left out, but it's okay. So we'll just, next time I'll just text. I'll do the group text, I'll just coordinate on outfits. I want to start with you, Congresswoman Jayapal, because you very recently, we're all coming here, and I think a lot of people watching are likely thinking about the attacks on the Postal Service. And they are very concerned with whether or not the president is trying to manipulate or interfere in the election in real time. You confronted Bill Barr on this question about any manipulation of the mail-in balloting process. What's your reaction to these latest reports about literal mail sorting machines being taken out of large cities and in places where we know they are going to be needed in November?
It is literal election theft. That's what's happening. Vote theft. And actually, I questioned Bill Barr on some other things, but at the very end, I did manage to get in that there was a study done by MIT that out of 250 million mail-in ballots that have been sent over the last 20 years, the fraud rate is 0.00006%. And he was literally on that panel before the Judiciary Committee trying to make the case that somehow this is fraud. Well, we know that the president and President Trump and Melania have both applied for absentee ballots. It's fine for them. Right. They're pushing absentee ballots in certain Republican states. And now, of course, they're trying to take away the ability for the Postal Service, and he's admitted it clearly, take away the ability for the Postal Service to actually count those ballots and deliver them for elections. So we have to have multiple grassroots strategies here. People need to vote early. They need to get their ballots into a ballot box if possible. And there are some efforts happening across the country. I was just talking about it last night with some folks who are actually trying to help make sure that they are dealing with this on a local level in multiple places.
It feels to me like the attacks are very much out in the open in a way that I've never seen before. I've never lived through an election where one side, I mean, it happens to be the incumbent president in this case, who is trying to put his thumb on the scale. And he's telling us what he's doing, to your point. So Representative Porter, what can we do? I mean, obviously, I think it is smart to figure out the way in which we can cast our ballots, right? And participate and make sure it's counted by putting it in the ballot box. But it feels like this is a bigger problem than just the ability to be able to vote and make sure our vote is counted. This feels like an attack on our democracy or some sort of undermining of our literal system. It feels bigger than just, fiddling around with some mailboxes.
Well, it is an attack on our democracy, and it's not the first one that we've seen from this president, and sadly, it won't be the last one before we are done with him. So I think if you feel like our democracy is under attack, I would tell you, yes, honor that feeling, and then ask yourself, what are you going to do about it? Kamala Harris, talked recently about her mom always saying that to her as a kid. Do you see injustice? What are you going to do about it? And I think that starts first and foremost with, as Pramila said, making sure you understand at the local level, how is your county going to carry out voting? Because we're seeing even within states, wide varieties of approaches at the county level. And so here in Orange County, it's a tough district. It's a Republican stronghold. I am the first Democrat to represent this patch of land in 75 years. And yet, our registrar of voters just put out an amazing report detailing all of the preparations he's made to keep people safe, to protect the right to vote during the pandemic. So it's not just Republican, Democrat, although from the top, obviously, we have a president who's trying to suppress vote. This is also about the machinery. if we're going to be saved in this time of crisis, it's not going to come from President Trump. It's going to come from postal workers who go the extra mile to get things delivered. It's going to come from the long-term and short-term employees at our voter registration offices. So if you're able, if you don't have a health condition, sign up to be a poll worker. Sign up to work at your local registrar of voters offices. Be part of the solution here and find out and connect with local organizations, because we're not going to be able to deliver a national solution in the wake of this president. So we're going to do what we've long had to do when it comes to voter suppression, which is organize person by person, community by community, even as warriors like Barbara and Pramila and I are trying at the federal level to hold this president to account.
To that point about voter suppression, Representative Lee, I think, many of the communities that are being targeted with voter ID laws and other arduous obstacles and hurdles to have access to the ballot box, many of those communities are the Democratic base. They're Black and brown voters, they're younger voters, college campuses, college students, high school students. And so I think that these laws are definitely targeted in a partisan way, but to the representative's point, I don't think what's happening right now necessarily is partisan, right? I think everybody should want more people to vote than fewer. So my question to you, Representative Lee, is essentially about your thoughts on whether or not this is racist voter suppression, because many of like I said, the communities that are being targeted, they're not white, they're not suburban, they're going straight to the urban communities, taking those drop boxes out of there so that people cannot participate. So do you think this is racist voter suppression?
It absolutely is racist voter suppression. And let me tell you, it's also another form of a poll tax. It also is another form of trying to make sure that people are, especially people of color, are so frustrated until they just won't go vote. Now, let me tell you, I was campaigning for, I still say, our governor of Georgia, Stacey Abrams. And I was there several times. And on the first day of early voting, I saw lines and lines and lines, primarily of African Americans in rural communities. And they would get up to the front of the line after taking off work and spending a whole day finding that their name was not on the roll. Then had to figure out where their polling place was. And so there are a lot of subtleties that tell me that this is racist voter suppression. Also, in terms of just voter ID laws, when you look at that, my aunt is 99 years old. If she had to produce a birth certificate, African-American woman, 99 years old, where's she going to get a birth certificate from? And so she would be unable to vote. And so when you look at where these laws are targeted and where voter suppression is primarily Black and brown communities. And so, yes, we have to call it what it is. We have to speak through the truth. And our communities, though, have to know that we have to fight back, because in addition to voter suppression, we know that there's foreign interference. And we know that the foreign interference actors that are out there, they're targeting also Black and brown communities to try to divide and conquer, to try to create confusion, to try to turn us toward against each other. So this is another manifestation of racist voter suppression.
It feels like, just to follow up on that point about the foreign interference piece of this, in 2016, we saw Russia, pose as Black Lives Matter activists and Black voters. And, there were a lot of bots and fake accounts that were, pretending to be other people and trying to manipulate the beliefs of voters as they were assessing the candidates. Have you, in your work, seen any reports of that happening again? And what's your advice to voters and your constituents on how do you differentiate between propaganda and real and true, accurate information?
Well, I saw it last time, absolutely, and of course we know what happened. But I think in this instance, we have to make sure that we verify what's out there by calling our office, the county registrar's office, and we have to not believe when you see something that's on the internet that is divisive, just know it probably is a bot, or it probably is Russian interference, and just don't believe it. We, of course, have been working with the tech companies to try to get them to come forward and deal with this. And so it's very hard because sometimes we're just so busy we can't figure this stuff out. But I think at this point in time, given that our democracy is so fragile, we need to, anytime we believe even that something is going south, we need to check in and verify with those that you trust. And hopefully that's your elected officials and your NAACP, right, your voter participation, civic engagement organizations.
Absolutely.
Lena, if I can just follow
yes,
up
please.
on that. We know absolutely that the Russians are launching a full out effort to interfere in our elections and to promote Donald Trump. That even the director of intelligence under Trump has released a statement saying that. So I think we should all be very clear about what's happening. And Barbara is exactly right. We got to check our information. We're going to continue to put pressure on the tech CEOs. I actually asked Mark Zuckerberg just about this question the day after Bill Barr. I said, are you too big to care that you don't even want to do anything about the ad boycott that several incredible civil rights organizations are running to say to Facebook, you need to take on this hate speech and these mistruths on your platform? And he said, of course, we're not too big to care. But I think if you don't respond and you deliberately mock and say that advertisers are, of course, going to come back, that, of course, points to monopoly power and anti-competitive behavior. And it also points to the fact that those platforms have a lot of responsibility here, and they really do need to step up. At the same time, it does come down to how we respond to that. We already know that there were posers that were put in to the Black Lives Matter protests in Minneapolis, and that some of those people were paid to come in by conservative groups. So we just have to really recognize what's happening here and do exactly as Barbara said. We all do exactly as Barbara said anyway, all the time, but do exactly as Barbara said and check and verify and never believe what you're seeing. Check and verify.
So I essentially have the same question for all of you, because we're sitting here in a pretty amazing week. We're sitting here on a Friday night after a week where history was made. I woke up the other day and I looked around and I was like, what is this unfamiliar emotion I'm feeling? Oh, hope. Hope. That's what that is. So I want to just go around the circle here. I'll go left to right in terms of the order that I have on my screen. So Representative Porter, first to you. First part of the question is, what is Kamala Harris and her being on the ticket? What does that mean to you? And how can progressives work with a future Biden-Harris administration to push forward on our shared progressive values?
Well, it's obviously a historic nomination. It's one that gives me hope too. It's also an opportunity for a partnership. This is somebody who has changed her views as she's changed jobs, as she's changed roles, as she's learned, as she's grown. And that's our opportunity as progressives to ensure that that continues. I worked with Senator Harris when she was our Attorney General on the bank settlement. And I saw her walk out of a negotiation, angering not just the big banks, but even angering Democratic attorney generals who felt that she ought to get along to go along. And she wasn't willing to do it. She wanted a better deal for the people of California. And she asked me to help fight to make that deal happen. So we all have a role, every single one of us, in shaping the Biden-Harris administration. And that role is more than just disagreeing. It's trying to positively influence that agenda by being loud, by being strong, by being strategic, by doing the kind of work that folks like Pramila are doing on policy committees, but also by speaking up and asking, why don't you have a policy committee on the issues that I care about, for example? So we've been talking with the Biden-Harris campaign. I want to see a committee on consumer protection. It's really, really important. I want to see a committee on antitrust and market power. And then I want to see that committee staffed with the very best minds who are willing to stand up and speak truth to power and help push the Biden-Harris campaign to be ready to do that on day one.
Representative Jayapal.
That was so beautifully said. I also feel a lot of joy. Obviously, Kamala Harris and I were elected the same night to Congress. I became the first Indian American woman in the U.S. House. She became the first Black and Indian American woman in the U.S. Senate. The second Black woman, the first Indian American woman in the U.S. Senate. And our families have a connection, strangely enough, that I wrote about in the LA Times today. There's an op-ed there. But I think that what Katie is saying is so important. I worked on the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force. I co-chaired the healthcare task force, and we saw how Joe Biden was able to really develop his platform and have a much more bold healthcare platform. Did it get all the way to Medicare for all, which is what all three of us believe should be the case? All four of us. I don't know. I don't want to speak for you, Zerlina, but that's what it should be in the United States. No, we didn't get to Medicare for all, but we got significant foundational pieces of Medicare for all into this platform, including that any public option would not be administered by private insurance companies, but would be administered by Medicare, a substantially better public option at the platinum level. Automatic enrollment. If you get kicked out of your job, we untether jobs and healthcare for the first time. Long-term care supports and services, tremendous expansion of that work. And so I think that we just have to recognize there are two choices on the ballot. It is Joe Biden and it is Donald Trump. And there is nobody that can argue to me that any progress that progressives care about is possible with Donald Trump in the White House. Just not possible. So what does that mean? Can you sit out the election because you don't really like either one? Well, you could, but you know what that is? That is giving a vote to Donald Trump because you're not affirmatively putting it on the table for the other choice. And we know that a third party candidate is not going to win. So that will take away from the votes that we are going to need. And I just think that for progressives across the country, we have to recognize what it means to be progressive is that you are the first to the best and most just idea. And everyone else has to catch up with us. So let's celebrate that we're out front, in front of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris on a bunch of issues. Let's celebrate that we can push them in different directions. And let's celebrate that we have removed from office in November the most racist, xenophobic, constitutionally destroying president that we have seen in modern history.
Representative Lee.
Yeah, first, let me just say to Congresswoman Jayapal, what a phenomenal job she did on that healthcare task force, co-chairing it. Because I, for one, carried the first single payer bill when I was in the California legislature, and of course, support Medicare for all. And for progressives to make this type of progress as it relates to the task force recommendations. I served on the drafting committee for the platform this year, 2016 and 12. And this is by far is the most progressive platform. And because of Pramila and those who served on the task forces, the consensus that was brought between the delegates from the Bernie Sanders and Biden constituencies made this platform so progressive, so much more progressive, and it should be used. I hope people read it because oftentimes it gets put on the shelf, but read it as a guidepost and what we need to push further on and what we need to do as we take over, hopefully, if we do our work in November, Democrats. And let me just say, first of all, what the hope that I felt when Kamala was selected as our VP candidate was overwhelming. Couple of things. First of all, she was born in Oakland, California, my district. I know her very well. I campaigned with her and supported her through all of her elections. And I think I was the first member of Congress actually to support her when she ran for the presidency. So I had a chance to go to South Carolina and North Carolina as surrogates and all over the country. And I saw the enthusiasm that people had for Senator Harris because she's prepared, but because she can relate to people and because she's such a smart, brilliant, but down-to-earth woman. But also, let me just say, Zerlina, I think what this means, it means another step toward the end of white politics.
Yes.
I got involved in campaigns. I wasn't a registered voter, refused to. I was community worker with the Black Panther Party in the early 70s. And I had class I was going to flunk because we were supposed to work in a campaign, and it was McGovern, Muskie, and Humphrey, dating myself, right? Shirley Chisholm was running, and she came as a result of the Black Student Union invitation that I was chairing. And she said she was running for president. And so, you know what? I didn't flunk the test. I got involved in her campaign. I got an A, went on to Miami as a Shirley Chisholm delegate, because I thought that then that was the beginning of the end of white politics. Then, of course, with Reverend Jackson, 84, 88, registered millions and millions of people, Black people, brown people, all around the country. Another step toward the end of white politics. And so fast forward to today, I just think with Kamala, this is another reason to read your book and to understand what you're saying, because it's another chapter in the end of white politics.
Absolutely. The chapter on Black women that I have in the book is called "In Black Women We Trust." And I feel today that, you know, Joe Biden made a choice that some people are saying is a safe choice. And I'm like, in what world is picking a Black woman for your presidential ticket in a country where we've never had any women win the vice presidency or the presidency? That's not the safe choice. That's the bold choice. In the last 6 minutes here, I want to go around again with the same question. How do you build sustainable progressive power? That's a question I want everyone to answer as we end this panel, so that folks can sort of have that marinating in their minds this evening. Representative Jayapal, first to you.
Well, when I came into Congress, I never thought I would run for office. I was an outside activist. I've built progressive power on the outside, and sometimes that's meant taking on Democrats as well, including Democrats I love. But I think that what I have realized is that we do need to have progressives in power everywhere, on the outside, on the inside, however you want to define that, in elected office, at every level. And then we have to build the infrastructure that supports progressives to win. And that means that, we did a lot of work to build the Congressional Progressive Caucus Center and the Congressional Progressive Caucus Action Fund, a C3 and C4, that can help really coordinate on organizing, on policy, on all of these different pieces, and provide information instead of getting it from lobbyists, which is what happens to people once they get into office. But also helping to elect progressives up and down the ticket. We've already seen that I think the path to progressive policy actually runs through the heart of blue districts, as well as swing districts like Katie Porter's, where Katie ran on an incredible progressive platform, and she has now become a standard bearer for those issues in a district where we've always known these issues can win, but we needed people with the courage to pick them up as Katie has done. But also in blue districts, districts where people like Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush and Mondaire Jones, and in Washington 10, Beth Doglio, these are opportunities to actually get real progressives into blue districts that can help push and carry our message forward. So I think all of those are really important, and everything stems from grassroots organizing, whether it's in the community or whether it's in the political system.
Absolutely. Representative Lee.
Sure. Progressive power is really what is moving this country forward. Someone asked me, a reporter, was Vice President-elect Vice President Kamala Harris to be vice president? Wasn't she too progressive? I said, wait a minute. If you think that supporting Medicare for all, $15 minimum wage, going to a living wage, if you think that supporting climate change and climate initiatives, if you support clean water and clean air, clean air, if you believe that everyone has a right to live in a decent and safe house, if you consider that progressive, then let's get it on and let's build this progressive power. And I think that and what Congresswoman Pramila said is so important, because I think there's such a way that we can organize in an intersectional way. Because, for instance, as an African-American woman, we have a lot in common with working class white people who have lost their jobs and who have been victim of the opioid crisis. We've had to deal with this forever in our country, for 401 years. And so why don't we work together and try to build that coalition? I come again from a district that coalition politics has been the way that we all get. Coalition progressive politics is the way that people of color are elected in my district. And so now it's so important that we have that inside-outside strategy in the Progressive Caucus, the Progressive Center, the Progressive PAC, all work together to build this kind of power. And we can't forget, we have to bring our young people along. We have to mentor our young people, because we have to pass this baton to their time now, because they have to run this lap of the race, and we have to be there to make sure that they know how to do this. And finally, we have to get money out of politics, because we have to build that progressive power around people and not profits.
Absolutely. But getting money out of politics feels like the one structural change that would fix most of the problems that we talk about in terms of improper influence. Finally, Representative Porter, same question to you. How do we build and sustain progressive power within our politics?
I think part of it is not making any assumptions about where progressive politics will be effective. So the real point about being a progressive is that we're trying to solve problems. We're pushing forward an agenda that recognizes where people are and where they deserve and need to be. And that means that you can run and win and connect with people in a deep and sustained way on progressive policy in every single pocket of this country. You might use different words. You might start from a different starting point. You might move ahead on a different issue in one place than another. But we can't say that this district can only be a place for a moderate, and this district can only be a place for a progressive, because the reality is people have problems and they want those who are going to push forward solutions. And that is as true in an R+1 Orange County kind of district like mine, or places like Oklahoma, places like Tennessee, places like Montana, as it is in Democratic strongholds. And so I think it's really important that we make space for progressive candidates to run and win on a level playing field in every part of this country.
That's so interesting to think about, because a lot of times we see progressive candidates win in districts where it's super blue, but it's really important that they should be running everywhere, and they can be running everywhere, because if you're just talking about issues, to your point, you can attract a wide swath of that electorate. I want to thank all of you for joining us for the beginning of our Friday keynote here at Netroots Nation. This is a weird Netroots, it's all virtual. But I love the red, and I love the conversation we've been having. So thank you all so much.